Hello, everyone. Welcome to English Insights. Today, we will learn about the long history of an island group that many countries still argue about. Recently, on November 16th, 2025, China sent Coast Guard ships near the Senkaku Islands. This happened after Japan's new Prime Minister made comments about Taiwan. This topic has been very hot for many years, especially when talking about sea borders in East Asia. But why do so many countries care about them? And who is the legal owner under international law? This video will not only help you understand history and politics, but it will also help you improve your English listening skills through current events. Now, let's get started. Part 1. Geography and Basic Facts. The Senkaku Islands are a small group of islands in the East China Sea. They are located in a very important area of the ocean. These islands are far from big cities, but they sit between several important places. This makes them easy to find on a map. The islands are about 170 kilometers north of Ishigaki Island in Okinawa. They are also around 170 kilometers away from Taiwan. From mainland China, the islands are about 330 kilometers away. Because the islands are almost the same distance from three different places, many people pay attention to their location. There are several islands in this group. The largest island is called Uatsuri Island. Two other well-known islands are Kuba Island and Taisho Island. There are also some very small rocks and islets around them. All of these islands together form the Senkaku Islands. These islands are uninhabited. No one lives on them. There are no houses, shops, or villages. The islands are mostly made of rocks and cliffs. The land is rough and difficult to walk on. There are no rivers, lakes, or large trees. Because of this, it is hard for people to stay there for a long time. Even today, the islands remain natural and untouched. Although the islands are empty, they are still very important. They lie in the middle of busy sea routes. Many ships pass near the islands every day. These ships travel between Japan, Taiwan, and China. The area is also rich in fish. So many fishing boats work nearby. Some studies in the past suggested that there might be oil and natural gas under the sea near the islands. This made the area even more interesting to many countries. The islands also help people understand history and law. In the past, before any country controlled the islands, they were considered Terra Nullius. This is a simple Latin term. It means land that belongs to no one. When a place is Terra Nullius, it means no country has claimed it yet. If a country takes control of this land first and shows clear actions, it can become part of that country. This idea is important when people talk about the history of the Senkaku Islands. Because of their location, resources, and history, the Senkaku Islands continue to be an important topic today. Even though no one lives there, the islands matter to many people and many nations. Part 2. Early History. Ming and Qing era. In this part, we look at the early history of the Senkaku Islands. We focus on the time of the Ming era and the Qing era. These periods are very old, and many people today try to understand what happened in those times. However, the history from that time is not always clear. Many records only describe travel routes, not land ownership. During the Ming era, Taiwan was not an official part of China. At that time, Taiwan was far away from the Chinese mainland, and it was not under full control. Because Taiwan itself was not part of the country, it is difficult to say that small, distant islands, even farther away, were controlled by China. The Senkaku Islands are much farther from mainland China than Taiwan is. If Taiwan was not governed, then islands beyond Taiwan were even harder to reach and control. The ocean around the Senkaku Islands is huge. In the past, people did not have strong ships, modern maps, or GPS. Travel at sea was difficult and dangerous. Most ships in the Ming era followed simple sailing routes. Sailors used visible islands only as signs to show directions. When ships passed near a lonely island, they often wrote the island's shape or gave it a simple name. These names were used to help future travelers find their way. But these names did not mean the ship's country owned the islands. They were only navigation points. Some old records mention islands in the East China Sea. But these records do not say that the islands were part of any country. They often describe them as small islands in the sea or rocks in the ocean. These descriptions were not about control. They were only notes to help sailors avoid danger and stay on the correct route. Many records from the Ming era were focused on safe travel, not political borders. The Senkaku Islands were uninhabited. No one lived on them. Because of this, they were not important to governments at that time. Governments usually cared about land, where people lived, where taxes were collected, or where soldiers could stay. Empty islands far away from the mainland were not useful. This made it unlikely for ancient governments to treat them as official territory. During the Qing era, the situation did not change very much. There is still no clear record saying that the Senkaku Islands became part of China. Some documents from that time talk about the sea area around the islands, but they do not show political control. They only describe the ocean and the direction of travel. If a record says, "An island is in the same sea area," it does not mean it is part of a country's land. It only means the island is somewhere on the route. Some writers in later years tried to interpret old texts as proof of ownership. However, the language in those books is often poetic or unclear. Many words describe the sea, the sky, or the journey, not legal borders. Because of this, it is difficult to use these old texts as evidence of control. Overall, there is no strong document from either the Ming era or the Qing era that shows the Senkaku Islands were recognized as part of China. Most writings from those times only describe the sea and the travel path. They do not describe government actions or official control. For these reasons, the early history supports the idea that the Senkaku Islands were not claimed or managed by any country during the Ming and Qing periods. The islands were simply quiet places in the ocean, used only as markers for travelers moving across the sea. Part 3. Japan's Incorporation in 1895. In this part, we will talk about how Japan took control of the Senkaku Islands in 1895. To understand this, we need to learn two simple ideas from international law. These ideas are prior occupation and valid control. Do not worry, we will explain them in an easy way. Prior occupation means that a country can take a place that belongs to no one. The place must not be under the control of any other country before. If the land is empty and has no people, the country can claim it, but it must show clear actions to make the place part of its territory. Valid control means that a country must take real actions to manage the land. These actions must show that the country is taking care of the land. It must be clear, open, and continuous. It cannot be only a simple visit. It needs to show real control. Now, let's look at the Senkaku Islands. In the late 1800s, Japan started to study the islands. From around 1885, Japan sent teams to survey the area. These teams checked the islands carefully. They looked for signs of people living there. They also looked for signs that another country was controlling the islands. The teams found nothing. There were no houses, no flags, and no documents from China. There was no sign of any rule or control by the Qing Dynasty of China. The islands were empty and unused. Because of this, Japan decided that the islands were Terra Nullius, or land belonging to no one. After many surveys and many checks, Japan made an important decision. In January 1895, the Japanese government officially made the Senkaku Islands part of Okinawa Prefecture. This was done through a formal cabinet decision. It was a clear and public action. After adding the islands to Okinawa, Japan took more steps to show valid control. These steps were important because they proved real management. Japan put up markers on the islands. A marker is like a sign that shows the land belongs to a country. Japan also allowed a private person to use some parts of the islands. This person built small facilities and used the land for business. This shows that life and work started to happen on the islands. The Japanese government also kept records of the islands. They gave the islands official numbers in the land registry. They leased parts of the islands and later sold some land to the private person. These actions are very important in international law. They show that the country is treating the islands like real territory. Japan also sent police officers and sometimes military ships to the area. These groups helped rescue people from accidents at sea. Rescue operations are strong proof of control because they show responsibility for the area. These actions were continuous and took place over many years. By taking all these steps, Japan met the rules required in international law. The islands were empty before. Japan studied them, claimed them, controlled them, and managed them openly. These actions fit the ideas of prior occupation and valid control. For these reasons, Japan's incorporation of the Senkaku Islands in 1895 is seen as a clear process under international law. The actions were official, open, and continuous. They also show that no other country was managing the islands at that time. Part 4. After World War II and the San Francisco Treaty. After World War II, many countries had to make new agreements. They needed to decide who would control different lands. One of the most important agreements was the San Francisco Peace Treaty. This treaty was signed in 1951 and came into effect in 1952. It explained which lands Japan could keep and which lands Japan had to give up. It was a big step toward peace in Asia after the war. The treaty listed the places that Japan renounced. These included Taiwan, the Pescadores Islands, and some other territories. However, the Senkaku Islands were not on this list. They were not mentioned as land that Japan had to give away. This means the treaty did not remove the Senkaku Islands from Japan's territory. At the same time, the treaty also placed many islands under temporary control by the United States. These islands were part of a larger island group called the Nansei Shoto. The Nansei Shoto Islands were located in the southwestern part of Japan. The Senkaku Islands were included in this group. Because of this, the United States became the administrator of the Senkaku Islands after the war. Japan did not lose ownership, but the U.S. was in charge of managing the area. During this period, there were no major protests or objections from nearby countries. No one said that the Senkaku Islands should belong to another country. Countries around the region accepted that the United States was managing the islands as part of the Nansei Shoto group. This silence is important because it shows there was no dispute at that time. The United States used some of the islands in the Nansei Shoto for military activities. In some cases, they even used part of the Senkaku Islands as training areas. Again, there were no strong objections from other countries. This shows that people did not question the status of the islands during those years. In 1972, everything changed again. The United States decided to return administrative rights of the Nansei Shoto Islands to Japan. This agreement was called the Okinawa Reversion Agreement. When the U.S. gave back control, the Senkaku Islands were included in the handover. From that moment, Japan once again managed the islands directly. Even at this time, there was still no major conflict about the islands. The transfer happened smoothly. For many years, countries around the region did not oppose Japan's administration of the islands. This period in history is important because it shows that the Senkaku Islands were not part of the territories Japan lost after the war. They were placed under U.S. control only for a period of time and later returned to Japan. Understanding this helps explain why the Senkaku Islands remain under Japanese administration today. Part 5. Claims from the 1970s and Oil Survey. In 1968, a group of experts worked with a United Nations agency to study the East China Sea. They wanted to learn about the ocean floor and the natural resources under the water. During this survey, the experts suggested that there might be oil and natural gas near the Senkaku Islands. This idea quickly received attention. Many countries became interested because energy resources are very important for the future. From this moment, the islands became much more famous around the world. Before the year 1968, the islands were not in the news very often. They were small, uninhabited, and quiet. For many decades, no country strongly argued about them. Ships passed by, fishermen worked in the area, and life continued normally. There were no protests and no big political discussions about the islands. Even when the islands were under the administration of the United States after World War II, there were no strong objections. The U.S. military used two of the islands as training areas for firing and bombing practice. They used these places for many years. During that time, no country made a major complaint about this activity. This shows that before the 1970s, the islands were not seen as a problem or a point of conflict. There are also several documents from earlier years that describe the islands in a simple and clear way. For example, a letter from 1920 written by an official from another place called the islands Senkaku Islands, Okinawa Prefecture. This shows that the islands were recognized as part of Okinawa at that time. Another piece of evidence appears in a newspaper article from 1953. It listed the islands as part of the Ryukyu Islands. A map published in 1958 and again in 1960 also included the islands as part of Okinawa. These examples help us understand how people viewed the islands in the past. After the oil survey in 1968, some countries began to make their own claims about the islands. They started saying that the Senkaku Islands belonged to them. These claims only appeared in the 1970s, not earlier. This sudden change is important. It suggests that the possibility of oil and natural gas made the islands much more valuable. When something becomes valuable, more people want to have it. This is a simple way to understand why new claims appeared. The timing also shows that for many years before 1970, the islands were not treated as part of any major dispute. If the islands had been claimed strongly in the past, there would have been documents, maps, or protests. But for many decades, such things did not appear. Instead, the islands were mostly seen as quiet and uninhabited places connected to Okinawa. The situation in the 1970s changed the way people talked about the islands. From that time, governments and media paid more attention to the area. Discussions became more serious because energy is a very important resource. This is why the Senkaku Islands became a major topic during this period. Part 6. Modern Situation and International View. Recently, on November 16, 2025, China sent Coast Guard ships near the islands that Japan controls. China also warned its citizens, students, and travelers about possible safety risks in Japan. This happened after Japan's new Prime Minister made comments about Taiwan and said Japan could act if China attacked Taiwan. China did not give clear evidence for the warning, but it worried many people. It also affected tourism because many visitors to Japan come from China. The new Chinese patrols near the islands showed that the political situation was becoming more serious. These events remind us that the Senkaku issue is still active today and remains an important topic in the modern world. Today, the Senkaku Islands are under the control of Japan. Japan manages the islands carefully. The government takes care of the islands and makes sure that they are protected. Even though no one lives there, Japan sends officials and Coast Guard boats to watch the islands. These actions show that Japan has real control over the islands. Some other countries have different opinions. They see the Senkaku Islands as a political or diplomatic issue. However, most international experts say that this is not a legal dispute. A legal dispute happens when countries disagree about law and rules. In this case, Japan already has valid control over the islands, and history supports this. So, it is more a matter of diplomacy than law. International law looks at many things when deciding who owns land. Law experts check historical records, maps, and government actions. They also look at who lives there, who visits, and who uses the land. In the case of the Senkaku Islands, Japan has a long history of managing the islands. Japan made surveys, set boundaries, and even rescued shipwrecked people. These activities are important under international law. They show that Japan has had continuous and real control over the islands for more than 100 years. Historical documents are also important. Maps from the 19th and 20th centuries show that the Senkaku Islands belong to Okinawa, which is part of Japan. Official letters and records describe the islands as Japanese territory. For example, documents from the 1920s and 1950s clearly place the islands in Okinawa. Even during the time when the United States administered some islands after World War II, there was no serious objection from other countries about Japan's ownership of the Senkaku Islands. These records help show the truth. Diplomatic documents are useful too. They explain how countries interacted and what they agreed about. For example, after World War II, Japan and the United States made agreements about island administration. These agreements did not include the Senkaku Islands as a disputed territory. This information helps people understand that Japan's control is valid. In modern times, it is important to study history and facts. Learning about maps, old records, and government actions helps people see why Japan has control. Understanding the history also helps learners judge news or information about the islands. It teaches that some claims may appear suddenly without strong evidence. By studying history, we can see which claims are supported by facts and law. In conclusion, the Senkaku Islands are legally part of Japan. The islands are managed by Japan and have been under Japanese control for many years. Some countries may discuss the islands in politics, but international law supports Japan's position. Historical documents, maps, and government actions all confirm this. Understanding these facts is important for everyone. It helps learners see history and law clearly. It also helps people make correct judgments about news and stories they hear.